Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show to talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Harley Quinn. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, we were picking up in the aftermath of Bruce resurrecting his parents, and we got to see what that looks like. It's not just a regular zombie apocalypse, it's a plant-based zombie apocalypse. So everyone that comes back is very plant much like. And the fact is, you can tell Bruce is definitely a little off. The fact is, he's like, oh, don't worry about it. I just unzombify my parents and everything's going to be okay. And he's like, I know I look a little and sound a little crazy. It's like, wow. And I think this is kind of a sad thing that like even Ivy had to call him out for it. But she's like, Jesus, dude, he's never going to love you because it's like Nightwing refused to back down. It's like, no, Bruce knows what he's doing, you know, and it's like that blind loyalty that even Barbara has to some extent, where it's like, no, Bruce would never do anything, because they know him, but it's like, right, he's been so stricken with grief about everything, and I think it's actually an interesting thing. Jumping ahead a little bit, the fact is that the person he ended up talking to was King Shark. I thought was fascinating. I mean, that's what Harley wanted to do, but she didn't get the opportunity to really talk to him. But I think as Bruce held on to this for so long, that, I mean, he didn't, it's just a thing of him realizing like, oh wow, the ramifications of my actions. The fact is that I just wanted to bring back my parents. I didn't realize I was going to doom the city in the process. I mean, he spent the past 30 years saving this city, being in a position to save this city because of his family's murder. So now it's like, it's the irony now. It's like, right, your need to save the city. You thought you could kind of have it all, save the city and have your parents back, but your attempt to have your parents after all these years ended up costing you the city that you tried so hard to protect and save. So, and that's the irony too, is like he wanted to stop Ivy's plan, whatever it was, but he also, eventually turned it into his plan, which now ended up being an apocalyptic situation all on its own. So there's layers upon layers with that. I even love he tried to introduce him to Damien, and Damien just kind of like, yeah, I'm not about this shit, and just kind of like bounce. And even Barbara being like, do I even want to go in there? And he just shook his head no. She's like, okay, yeah, I pretty much figured I didn't want to go in there. But obviously they all have to work together because the plan went well beyond, as I said, well beyond just Bruce's parents, because now it's a full-blown zombie apocalypse in Gotham. Was it Jazzapajizza or something like that? It's like basically this giant jazz festival that got canceled. Apparently the Joker's the reason why it got canceled previously, so like last year or something like that. Either way, Ivy plans on going inside of the Green, and she's going to try and take control of all the zombies. And I love, obviously Harley's like, oh my god, confidence? Who knew that was my kink? And she's like, oh my god, I'm gonna have to change my shorts soon. It's like, because it's just like, Ivy being all assertive, and, because before she couldn't, like, formulate plans and stuff, and she kind of immediately bailed afterwards. But it's like her being confident now, and being like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna divvy up the work. So I also love that Clayface immediately left somewhere, and I'm like, oh, because I kept thinking to myself, I'm like, who the hell where could he have gone? It's like, oh, everyone that was dead is back alive, and I'm like, at first I was like, could he be thinking about Billy Bob Thornton? But it's like, he can't be, because if he was thinking about Billy Bob Thornton, it's like, well, King Shark ate his body, like, to cover it up. So, he wouldn't have gotten resurrected, would he? Not unless when King Shark shit him out, I don't know. That's the only person I can immediately think of, but I'm like, at first I was also thinking too, it's like, well, there's a whole bunch of villains, but some of them, like, were in very bad condition, so who knows if any of them ever got, any of those dead villains we got at that memorial and episode 3 at the Village, who know if any of them got resurrected or not. But I wonder who else could he have gone to try and see. Like, he just saw, I got something else to do, and left. Not unless he was spying, because I think he even made his, not joke, but even this situation where he was like, oh, do you think me basically pretending to be his parent, doing such a good job of pretending to be his dad, was, maybe that's something that happened in between, like, while Harley was still unconscious and when the rest of the Bat family ended up kidnapping the villains. Maybe that's when that happened, and maybe he's like, oh, I was trying to, see how good my work was, and that just sit Bruce down a deeper spiral or whatever. Either way, it sounded like that's what he did, that he put on a performance being like, oh, like, tell me how good of an impression this is of your father. Well, what little do you remember of him from 30 years ago? Which was even that sad line from Bruce as being when he was talking about Damien. It's like, oh, teenagers, right? He's like, oh, I'm sorry. You wouldn't know that because I was 8 when you died. Anyway, moving on. But, Harley works with the Bat Nerds, as she kind of puts them, and, it's like, wait, why are there no guns or missiles on this? Which part of me wonders, is that supposed to be like a little nod to the conversations about like it really being a very, Batman doesn't kill thing. It's like a reminder of like, he doesn't have guns and missiles up here. It's like, this isn't the Batman you think it is. And it's like, yeah, we made a vow not to kill. And she's like, but what if it's like Gwyneth Paltrow, like she's like killing a baby or something like that? And it's like, even if she's being like a big asshole, it's like, yes, even if she's being a butthole, it's like, oh my god, butthole is so much worse because you can, like, it makes you visualize it or whatever. I love that. But they were doing work as a team, but the problem is Ivy and Swamp Thing, I guess his attempt to try and help just blundered it even more, being like, you could use the power to green for so much good or evil. It just comes down to what you want. She's like, so even my original plan? He's like, yeah, sure, I guess. He's like, I kind of biffed that, didn't I? I was like, you did. So now she's back wearing kind of a very traditional Poison Ivy outfit, which I like. Because last episode, it was kind of like almost like this white dress, if I remember, but now it's like the full-blown green, like the boots and everything, like a very classic Ivy design. I assume that's very classic from the comics, because obviously it immediately makes me think of like the animated series, which obviously last episode kind of delved into that. The Batman the animated series from the 90s from Bruce Timm. Thinking about that, that's what I immediately think of. But I think she's had that design in the comics as well. The very because I think they modified it a little bit. But I was about to say I know some of the Arkham designs had that. Either way, putting the tensions and all that aside, she plans on utilizing this to kind of terraform the play. And it was like, it's like, shouldn't we talk to Harley about this? It's like, fine, Harley wanted what I wanted, so it's all going to be fine. She's going to completely understand, because it's what we were aiming for, and this is what we're planning for. So she's using the zombie apocalypse to infect other people and spread it throughout. I also love that Harley's little keepsake of Ivy is a picture of her, like, I guess coming out of the shower or whatever, and her, like, holding her hand out, like, oh my god, don't take a picture of me. It's like, that's super cute. I think it is such an interesting thing when Harley has to inadvertently be the hero sometimes. I mean, I don't know if she's really going anti-hero in the comics or not. Obviously, she's still a villain, like even in like the Suicide Squad and stuff. Like, they're still villains, they're still killing people, but we're just doing villainy for good, I guess. So I don't know if she's... I don't know if she's even labeled as an anti-hero, even like in the comics or not. I've never really heard them label her as one, but maybe she kind of is. I'm once again, I'm not well versed in the comics, but I am, because like the fact is, in this show she does kind of do more good than evil sometimes. I mean, don't get it twisted, they still do villainy, but she does kind of do her own hero thing sometimes. And the fact is that she has to try and stop Ivy, but Ivy's like, no, this is what we wanted. I mean, yes, Bruce kind of fucked up the plan, but I figured take advantage of the situation and we kind of still get the end result. But Harley's like, but innocent people are dying. It's like, yeah, I get you want to like get rid of all the bad people, you want to terraform the planet and turn it into an Eden, but this is kind of a very messed up way to go about it. It's like, truth be told, is like, we never got a full understanding of how far Ivy was going to go for her Eden. Like, would it have involved killing all the humans and get rid of them so that they could save the plants and stuff, which I did like. And I think it's interesting how she kind of speaks from them. It's like, well, you might be, Poison Ivy, but you are still human despite your transformation. But maybe in her mind, she sees herself more plant than human, I guess. She's always been on their side, but it's just interesting because she was speaking more directly from the point of view of, I'm one of you guys. Like, they step on us, they grow us to, like, feed, like, to, like, to grow their meat or whatever, like, like feeding plants to cows and stuff, and then they piss on us, they spit on us. It's time for us to spit back, So I thought that was just an interesting thing of like, I've never really known whether Ivy, like how Ivy views herself. Like, I know she's very plant, obviously she's on the very like eco-terrorist side of things, but it's interesting to know she views herself more plant than human, and I guess that's still part of her psychology of like, well, of course she would. So, I mean, who knows how much of her actually is considered, biologically speaking, human, just like how much probably plant she's become over the years. I don't know. I guess I've never really given it too much thought into it. and also Harley kind of feeling this responsibility because she's the one that kept like, she wasn't 100% all about it, but it's like she was 100% about it simply because Ivy was. She wanted to make Ivy happy and was getting this that complicated thing of like, right, kind of going to such extreme lengths for the person you love and care about. It's like, right, I need to, like, it's like, right, and realizing like, I mean, probably like she didn't think things were going to be as wild out as far as they did. She probably thought things would have been a little bit more in control than what they ultimately ended up being. So, but it is the thing of like, right, I gave you all this confidence, and now she's in this tough place where it's like, right, I love you, Ivy, but I've got to stop you from going down this route. These are innocent people getting hurt. It's like, I get you want to go about changing the world, but this isn't how you go about doing it, you know? And it's like, the fact is now it kind of puts them at odds to some extent. And we didn't really dive into it this episode, but I'm wondering what the ramifications of that will. I mean, every relationship has a bumpy road, and Harley was willing to sacrifice herself to turn herself into like some of the to get infected so that Ivy would have no choice but to reverse things. Which I love that Bane's like, oh my god, I thought I was over this, because he saw a pasta maker being sold, and then he tries to call his therapist, but she's already zombified, and Harley jumped in the way, and he's like, oh my god, Harley, you tried to sacrifice yourself for me. I'm not mad about the pasta maker anymore. And just kind of moves along. It's like, she wasn't intentionally sacrificing herself for you, but okay, cool. At least they don't have to worry about the revenge that you've been holding against them, even though you haven't really acted upon it, even though you wanted to act upon it early on. But once the mall got blown up earlier in the season, you kind of let that go, didn't you? So I just think that's kind of interesting. Yeah, because they knew you had an issue, but they were also like, who cares? They weren't thinking about it. They weren't even a bit concerned about you. But Ivy ended up reversing everything. Granted, King Shark had to brutally murder Bruce's parents, because he's like, right, I've got to fix this. You know, it took me 30 years to, and it got me to this point of, trying to get over your deaths, and now I'm going to have to spend the next 30 years feeling even more responsible because I'm about to have to brutally murder you. But King Shark's like, don't worry, bro, I got this for you. You might just want to look away and cover your ears. But, I mean, assuming King Shark did that before before Ivy had to undo everything. At first, when some of them were still and passed out, I was like, wait, so some people weren't saved? It's like, no, I was like, right, those are people who are already dead and were resurrected. So, but Ivy looks at what her Eden could have been, and it's like, right, she failed the previous Eden, and now this one as well. She was so close, and now, because I don't know, she was going to make Gotham, she's like, Gotham's about to go green, and we're going to make this announcement to the world. I assume the rest would eventually flow to the rest of the world, not unless she would have stopped at Eden. But I am legitimately curious to see, is there going to, she seems happy, obviously, Harley being back, Harley being okay, because Harley's like, I did this without even really, I was hoping this was going to happen, that this is how it worked, but she's like, I truly didn't understand or know the rules of, plant magic, so it's going to be interesting to see if Ivy's going to hold any issues against Harley because of this, or will this kind of, I hope it doesn't, but makes you wonder, will they break up at the end of the season because of it? It seemed like they're okay, but it's for now, it's oh, she's relieved that Harley's okay, but then Harley kind of stopping her plan, and them kind of both wanting different things, but it's no, they wanted the same thing. It's just Harley didn't want her to approach things from this. I don't know. I just hope it doesn't cause issues in their relation. I'm curious if it does or not. It might just be something they completely pass over. We're fine, or maybe it's going to lead to some problems. We'll ultimately have to wait and see. The next episode is the season finale. Once again, the season's a little shorter to my understanding, so I'm curious to see how this all plays out, how this all wraps up. Like I said, if I'm correct, but I'm fairly certain I saw that it's only 10 episodes, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens next. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.